Greetings and namaste. This is Shiva, your friendly neighborhood wellness co-creator. On my mission, hopefully your mission, of wellness for all. Today I'm doing another twofer, back in the saddle with my online education, continuing to learn as, I put and share what I know out there or have experienced more appropriately, because knowledge is a very temporary thing. It's when you think you know something that you realize that there's so much more to know, right? So today's topic is really around trends in education, and obviously I am gonna put a wellness spin on it because that's where my piece of the pie is. So I was reading this book, or at least flipping through it really quickly, a book by Seifert and Sutton called Educational Psychology, the second edition, and it's I think funded by the Saylor Foundation, and it is a global text project production. So that book, initially they talk about trends in education, so I just looked at like the four things they mention. The first thing is diversity. The second thing is accountability. And the third thing is technology. Well, actually, technology was number 2. Accountability was number 3, but go figure. I haven't memorized them yet. And then number 4 was professionalism. So I was like, that makes sense from general schooling, K through 12 standpoint, which is what the coursework is largely concerned with. But I was like, how does that apply to wellness education, that specific component? So maybe just talking about the first one, diversity, and comparing it to my own experiences and my own notions of what historically that narrative has been or paradigm has been, and how there might be a shift one way or the other as we look at present day scenarios. So diversity, well, first I guess it's important to understand what basically diversity means, right? And for me that really means painting with a much broader brush than was in the past. So in the past, if I think about it, the world was a smaller place, right? And you could kind of be in your little pond, be that, frog in your whale pond, whatever, and not really have to know a whole lot about what was going on because, well, you weren't directly affected by it. Butterfly effect, chaos theory, and quantum entanglement aside, from a more physical, material experience, it was like, who cares if there's like a snowstorm in Siberia? It's got nothing to do with my life in the desert here, But now that the world shrunk in a sense that not just travel is taking hours where it used to take, weeks and months by ship or by land, but now it's like, wow, you can get from A to B in a matter of hours, covering thousands of miles. Many thousands might take a little over a day, give or take. And that's not the only thing that shrunk. The thing that's really shrunk is communication, in the sense that communication has exploded so much and it's become real time that, back in the day when I was growing up, there was a thing called telegrams, and that was the fastest way of sending a message of, either something of great joy, like a child being born, or, a news that was not the best thing, like, someone's passing away, just to bookend those two events of life and death. But now you have the internet and this whole amazing information highway of interconnected computers, and content is churning out faster than we can even fathom, let alone take it in. So I think that's really what diversity means, and in education is when you're looking at so many different influences, so many different ingredients in the mix. How do you cater to them? Well, certainly you can't cater to them all, but how do you cater to them in a meaningful way? How do you extract the core principles maybe of each of these different ways of looking at the worldviews, if you will, and distill them in a way that's digestible for an average student, if there is such a thing as an average student, right? But that is digestible for a diverse audience, which is coming, at it from different perspectives and different cultures and different ways of being in the world. So I think that's the first challenge, and we'll come to what the wellness take on that is. So when I look at wellness, I think about, we had PE class. It was called PT class, physical training, back when I was growing up in India, and it basically consisted of a mixture of athletics, some sports, some specifically Indian sports for like Kho, and we used to obviously play cricket, and there were also some other things, just like playing handball, which was kind of volleyball but a little less intense maybe, where you didn't always have to like slap the ball. You could actually use your hands to throw it over as well. But yeah, that was sort of the wellness piece. And if I fast forward to today, wellness from a physical standpoint is still largely that. It might be different sports depending on where you go. For example, in Minnesota, it's winter for a good part of the year, and during that time, ice hockey is big news. There's a lot of hockey fans here, as in our neighbor up above, Canada. And that's just how it goes. So what influences education is also the geographic location and the seasonality of sports, if you will. But if I think of maybe what's missing is still that integration of that mind-body connection. I think after you get to a certain level in sports, that just happens. But that happens to like this very, very small percentage of players who are participating at the inter-school level, the intercollegiate level, the national level, and so on. But for again, the random person in class who is just treating physical or phy-ed as yet another class, specialist class during the week, how does it really resonate for them as a mind-body practice? Not so much, I think. And I think that's where some of the disciplines like yoga, mindfulness, breath work, even agility drills, where one is not necessarily just doing gymnastics, but trying to figure out agility patterns in a more problem-solving way. Like, when I was a kid, I remember I used to climb trees, and for me, that was a big brain racker, because you had to not only have a strategy for going up the tree, you had to have one for coming down, plus you had to have one for not getting too beat up in the process or scratched up. And then when you actually had to do the act, you had to like fire. You had to have this neuromuscular coordination that got you shimmying up and got you shimmying down, all in a day's work. So when I think of that, I think of some of the swings we played on, where we played games where one was called head touch. We'd be on this sort of bar like contraption where one could basically climb up the bars, and if someone was climbing and then you were necessarily behind them, it was hard to touch their head from that point. So you had to figure out a way how to climb up faster, down, up another side or something, or jump down or something of that nature to go and be able to, touch their head. And I remember sometimes some guys would even hang upside down to avoid the guy on top, who's chasing them from touching their head. So when I think of some of that, I think that's sort of being lost. Some of those opportunities are being lost by the system even today. So I'm not really exactly happy with that trend. The one trend I am happy with, though, is at least here, in my son's school, for instance, and I think that's the case for the district as a whole, because I kind of see the report card and I see, spots on there for different areas that they're grading. I see that there's an area for social emotional wellness. And that's where I think there should be more focus, because if we look further downstream into adulthood and some of the issues that come up psychologically, emotionally, whether it is the exceptional person who goes into a school and starts shooting at random, or it is something more prevalent like the over 50% divorce rate. There's something in that could be addressed early on in the development cycle in a wellness sort of construct that would serve students well going forward. Let me do a quick battery check here. I'm doing good. So yeah, I'm just kind of thinking about some of the opportunities there that, it's great that they put social emotional wellness on the card, but there still needs to be a lot of work done before it actually starts translating into really, really meaningful outcomes downstream, and even reverse engineering back to, okay, where did this issue start? What leads, for example, marriages to fall apart? And if that is the construct, the social construct, or the system that is to be followed, then it makes sense to invest in its longevity, because whenever a marriage falls apart, it doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help the two people who came together involved. If they have children out of wedlock or otherwise, it doesn't help them. It doesn't help friends and family. It's sort of definitely a division on all scores, and not just of property. It's a division of hearts, minds, and resources and material possessions. So that's kind of my take on diversity, is that there needs to be a more diverse look at wellness. It's not just the body. It's not just doing jumping jacks. It's maybe integrating the breath with the body a little more, going into the neuroscience of that, how that leads to better sleep, and how better sleep leads to a more engaged student, not just in PE class, but all through the day, and how that manifests into a more complete learning experience, and a more complete individual, and a more complete life. So yeah, that's sort of my dream there. So diversity is a big part of that. So I agree with Seifert there around, diversity does apply to wellness. The second thing he talks about is, and I switched the numbers up at the introduction of this video, but the second thing they talk about, I think, is technology. And again, I don't know their exact spin on it, but I just read the big four, and I thought I'd just improv on that first before I go down, read, and be influenced. I'm just trying to see, okay, what comes organically to me. So technology, I mean, we sort of touched on that already. It's really shrunk the world, because it's really affected communication. It's affected accessibility. It's sort of leveled the playing field in so many ways. I mean, like, one of my passions is making music, and there was a time when I couldn't even imagine that I would be able to produce and release something for public consumption from a home setting. But here I am. My home studio is here, modest as it is, to my right, and this is my library, so my book library. But it's just like technology has enabled me to, with minimal infrastructure and minimal space and minimal investment, to make possible something that other people would still be able to enjoy and relish with a certain level of quality, which is not all that far away from more professionally done, or the best of the best. But for those who really know how to pick out those finer nuances, for the lay listener who's just out to shake a leg to a nice beat, or just looking for some new melodies, or like for a podcast, which is what I've done recently, is to put some background music around those podcasts that resonate with the theme. It's you can't really tell a meaningful difference. So technology is huge in terms of not only leveling the playing field, but accessibility. I mean, this course I'm doing, the master's course I'm doing, is completely online. It's a completely online university, and that would not be possible back in the day. I'd be going to a brick and mortar university, and God forbid, had COVID happened, then I would have been doing something very different from simply continuing on Zoom at my alma mater. So technology is just whether we love it or hate it, or it's intrusive, or our privacy is not respected, whatever it might be, the fact is it's powerful, and it does create a lot of opportunity. It creates a lot of inclusivity. It creates a lot of accessibility. And the university I'm attending, University of the People, UO is actually a non-profit university. So technically it's tuition free. All you have to pay is the assessment fees for when you take the exams. If you decide not to get it assessed, you don't get credited for that, but you basically didn't pay either, right? And for example, in my case, if I were to maybe do the minimum required courses for my master's, I'd be just under $3,000, and I think it's gone up since then a little bit. But for me, if I complete it on time and just do the minimum, I'd be no worse than $3,000 all told, without any factoring in any scholarships or grants, which also I like to take advantage of to make the best of what's out there. So technology has really helped, and COVID, like I said, has been at the forefront of that, where it minimized the disruption. It took a lot of muscle, it took a lot of effort, infrastructure for the schools to come up with a system that they could roll out en masse to folks. So folks from varying socioeconomic backgrounds and time commitments could still have their kids participate in distance learning or remote learning. But from what I can see, it's they pulled it off. They use technology. In India they use WhatsApp. Over here they've used Seesaw, and Clever came later, and just these desktop apps and platforms that are accessible on your phone, on your laptop, on any device really, and allow you to continue your studies. And I'm going to just plug in the laptop here. All right, one check. See, it's plugged in. Yep. So yeah, I mean, just that alone is like worth the price of admission, right? And it's again at this is talking at the school level, but if you think about what sort of infrastructure might have been needed if this technology was not there, to have socially distanced classrooms, where would you get the land? How would you build the buildings? How would it be winter friendly? I mean, there's like a million things that might come up with technology. It's like, yes, everyone has a roof over their heads that goes to school essentially, and that's where they're gonna beam in the lessons going forward. And that's how the system's been working for the past several months. So technology is not a trend that's going away. Putting a wellness spin on it, I mean, you've got the Fitbits of the world. You've got like a dozen and gazillion apps that are going to help you create mindfulness in your life, put timers on how long one might have been sitting at the desk to say, hey, go stretch and move around, or just like nature friendly scenes or music that relaxes the mind. I mean, there's just like so much out there in terms of technology and what it's made possible. So in wellness, technology is also here to stay. And I know my initial take on wellness and tech was a little, I want to stay away from tech just because of like some of the more radiation aspects of it and the electrical interference issues. But what ended up happening was that a little crying going on there. I'll go down, get it if it gets out of hand. But I think there's a couple of people there covering the bases. But yeah, I mean, you can really use technology to your advantage. I mean, this whole YouTube channel is a result of that, because COVID came and I was like, okay, wellness still needs to be put out there, and lo and behold, technology came to the rescue. And I'm not putting a whole lot of technique into it. I'm just sort of going as it comes, but that's available, should I feel the need for it. And if not, here it is, kind of simple, live and direct for you. So yeah. And if I think about number 3, accountability, what I think Seifert and Sutton are saying there is there's just a higher expectation and more pressure, in a sense, on the system to deliver education that's meaningful and is actually practical. So gone are the days when there's a whole lot of like memorization and theoretical treatments, where when you got to real life or working a real job, you had to sort of learn from scratch again. I mean, theory was good. It gave you a bit of a analytical perspective. It gave you some computational power, but it wasn't really hands-on. And I think that's where the trend today in education is more hands-on. It's like you do projects, you apply this, you show, you build, you experiment. And the same goes for wellness. Wellness is also a very much an action-oriented discipline. I mean, I can read about yoga all day and it'll be like a mind-blowing experience in terms of just the beautiful concepts that might be out there for the taking. But until I start to fold those into my life, until I take those few minutes off and experience mindfulness, it's just another longer word on a piece of paper in a book. Moment I click, close the book or stop reading the article or stop watching the video, mindfulness is gone. So I have to experience that. If I want to experience the joys of breath, whether it's an energizing breath or whether it's a letting go breath or whether it's a balancing breath, Brahmana, Langan, and Samana breath, all of those are like things to experience. That's something that's right here, and I can access that anywhere, any place, anytime. As long as I kind of know the principles and I've sort of connected with that part of myself. So in terms of accountability, where that leads up to is that it has to be tangible. One has to be accountable to not just being educated on paper, not just being well by virtue of having understood something, but by virtue of having experienced and performed that. So in an education sense and wellness sense, I think it's like, does that lead to the desired performance in life, or does that lead to better overall health, or does that lead to a more meaningful career or work, or a more fuller life? So there's more accountability and expectation, and the fact that traditional education has been skyrocketing. I think two things come to mind, where prices have skyrocketed like crazy. One is education, and the other is medicine, just going through the roof. And so at some point, I think education, we're already seeing it, where online has made things so much more accessible. I mean, one can basically, I've seen books where, how to get an MBA without joining a college. I mean, if you just need to get the practical skills, there's some other creative ways to go about it. YouTube offers so much. Anytime you want to screw a light bulb or do something more complicated, YouTube is there. Go look it up on YouTube, and you have some kind soul who's or some market savvy soul, or someone in between who's decided to put it out there. And long story short, someone is benefiting from those educational experiences that are out there for the taking. And again, very accessible, very available. YouTube even has language translations, and so closed captions. So I mean, even in that inclusivity sense, great strides have been made since the days of not so long ago. So yeah, that's sort of accountability and expectation. And I think for like younger students, besides their own expectations, it's also like the parents who are trying to set them up for success in life, as like or the governments who are trying to set their citizens up for success, is that expectation of, let's invest in something that's accountable in a certain way for fulfilling these expectations of a higher quality of life, of a strong democracy, for example. Number 4 was so we had diversity, technology, accountability, and number 4 was professionalism. So professionalism refers to more of the teaching side. Is teachers, because of this accountability, there's a little more or much more appreciation of not just what they do, but what needs to be done in order to deliver that effective instruction. And so teachers are held to a high standard of whether it's basic education, or it's continuing education, or it's just keeping up to date with the latest trends. I know so many teachers through my son and my son's school and my daughter's school, where they might not have been that into tech before, but after COVID, they had to take that on for better or worse. And now those that have learned and become comfortable with technology can continue to reach the students with the lovely knowledge that they have. Otherwise, that whole delivery mechanism would have essentially been cut off, and that would have been so unfortunate if that were to have happened on a large scale. But I think, again, all the resources available and people's general familiarity with gadgets at this point, I think that's where smartphones are good. People are used to sort of that digital interaction and that whole paradigm that they're using, voice commands, and they're using, Siri and Alexa and what have you, and Google Meet and Zoom to really bring themselves into the classroom once they've mastered at least the basic aspects of establishing this technical bridge. So yeah, I mean, professionally, there's I see even in the wellness industry, I see so many acronyms these days. I mean, they're back in India when one was teaching yoga. It was, again, India's had being the birthplace of yoga. They had the traditional lineage-based system where the master would teach his students or disciples, and that's true of the East in general, the Far East in general, and they would in turn impart that, carry on the teachings to their students, and so on and so forth. But now it's more, again, in the sort of Western style, where you have this specific framework set up, and you go in one end as a student and you come out the other end as a doctor. You come out the other end as a advanced yoga teacher. You come out the other end as an Ayurveda practitioner. You come out the other end as a Reiki or Thai massage expert. And again, that combines both the rigors of modern assessment models, along with the cultural specifics of like hands-on practice and things of that nature. So I think, yeah, even in wellness, professionalism has definitely gone up several notches, and it continues to do so, especially in some cases, where there's more physical contact, there's licensing involved, and there's liability and all that type of thing. So in a sense, those are good things because they uphold a certain standard. Yes, they sometimes might be behind the curve a little in terms of certain things that are not yet vetted or don't have an official seal of some sort, but I think life on the bleeding edge in any discipline is like that, and one has to find a way to really prove something works before it becomes more mainstream and before it gets the more formal stamps of approval. So yeah, I mean, as you can see, there's challenges for all of these things, and there's opportunities. Diversity has challenges in terms of just the sheer breadth of things that have to be accommodated, whether it's students or whether it's ideas or concepts or influences from across the world. But it also broadens one's perspective. It also gives you the ability to go on this interdisciplinary adventure and synthesize, not just regurgitate what's already been said. Technology, like I said, is challenging. There's a learning curve there. There's some moving pieces, but boy, is it an enabler. If once you get the hang of it, and there's fallbacks available as well. Accountability too has its challenges. It's just, where do you find the time, right? And it's making trade-offs. What's really important at a certain stage in a student's life, or what is their requirement, and then that needs to go. If it's a nice to have, and the must-haves get center stage, but eventually everything kind of folds in when it's needed. And finally, professionalism again. You kind of need to do that self-investment so you can continue to share the wealth, as it were, outside as well. So yeah, I think all of what Seifert and Sutton have said fit in with my philosophy on wellness. I do have some other ideas too around wellness, like just being in harmony with nature is just one of my life principles. That I think is not specifically covered by them, or I don't see that as a mainstream trend even now, except in certain schools like the Waldorf school here, or the Gurukul system, or forest schools further back east, and some other things, just like I sort of touched upon, is more consciousness based and more mindfulness based practices being introduced in school, more breath work being done, more concentration and meditation, and really those flow exercises being done with kids, where they're not just treated as a bunch of cats, but they're treated as individual souls as well, and allowed to nurture and flourish. But that's the opportunity. So look forward, and hopefully this has been helpful. Maybe it spurs you to think about your own personal trends in wellness. Where are you heading? What do you see as your wellness paradigm back in the day? Maybe if you're older, midlife, and if you're older than that, then how does it serve you today, and kind of see how that matches up with the availability of what's around. So I guess I get to do my assignment now, and on that note, I wish you blissful wellness. Namaste.